In the middle of an average school corridor, between locker clangs and backpack shuffles, something unforgettable occurred. A moment, fleeting but consequential, that would resonate far beyond the halls where it unfolded. It started with a girl that most didn't notice. Maya Thompson didn't yell. She didn't pursue popularity. She just stumbled along life with quiet determination, good etiquette, and a dream in her heart. But then again, even the most gentle of people get driven to the edge. And when they come back, they don't just defend themselves, they give the world a new type of strength. What would you do if someone ever crossed a line you thought you'd never see? Would you freeze up? Would you run away? Or would you discover something within yourself that you hadn't realized existed? This isn't a tale of standing up. It's about the moment when a young girl equipped with grace, inner discipline, and quiet strength, instilled by a loving father, decided to draw a line that would not be crossed. But more than that, it's about what came next, because sometimes courage is not in the battle, but in the quiet that comes after, in the peaceful stroll to the principal's office, in the truths that are spoken gently when no one thinks you will say anything at all, in the way one act, made not out of anger but self-respect, can shift the mood of an entire school. Maya didn't become a hero in the classical sense. She didn't claim that title for herself. But in defending herself, she silently granted permission to others to have faith in their own voice, their own worth. And isn't that what so many of us want? The understanding that we don't need to scream in order to be heard, that we can stand our ground without sacrificing our gentle. That respect isn't a prize we beg for, rather it's a truth that we possess within. So if you've ever wondered whether your calm matters, whether your boundaries are enough, or whether your quiet dignity can make a difference in a noisy world, this story may stay with you. Because sometimes, the smallest moments reveal our greatest strength. And what went down that day in the hallway wasn't about one girl. It was about the type of strength that we all possess, and the moment we choose to utilize it. Come with me to where it started. It began just like any other Tuesday morning, the type where the sky was still a bit drowsy, and the breeze held a faint scent of dew and coffee. Teacher. Jefferson High, a government school nestled into the center of a residential suburban neighborhood, was already buzzing with activity. Teenagers scrambled toward lockers, sneakers screeched on gleaming tile, and voices echoed off the lofty ceilings like birds set free. In the shuffle was 16-year-old Maya Thompson, weaving through the throng with her characteristic silent determination. She wasn't the type of girl who caused a splash, never had been. With gentle eyes, cocoa brown complexion, and a quiet elegance about her, Maya walked with the sort of humility that didn't demand notice, but somehow won respect from those who noticed closely. She was one of those students teachers enjoyed having in class, always prompt, always prepared, the type of child who never lost her homework and never talked out of turn. She wanted to be a veterinarian one day, had already started volunteering at the animal shelter downtown on weekends. Her room at home had posters of wildlife rescue missions and neatly stacked books on biology and animal care. She had dreams bigger than the town she lived in, but you wouldn't know it unless you sat beside her for a while. To most of her classmates, Maya was invisible, not because she was not worth noticing, but because she liked it that way. She had her head down, followed the same paths every day, and enveloped herself with a sense of calm that made her feel invincible, until that calm was shattered in the most unexpected manner. That morning, Maya wore her favorite lavender sweater, the one her grandmother had given her, and clutched her notebook to her chest as she headed toward her third period chemistry class. Her mind was on an upcoming lab quiz, nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But the thing about normal days is how quickly they can turn into something else entirely. Because just around the corner, something was waiting. Not a physical thing, but an instant, a sudden, weighty instant that would shift how people perceived her forever. Amid the thronged hallway, laughter echoed off the lockers and music seeped from the earbuds of another. But Maya did not notice three boys leaning against the lockers up ahead. She had noticed them before, boisterous, popular, always horsing around, but she never gave them much notice. She assumed that if she walked, they'd get out of her way like the rest. But this morning, for some reason they didn't move. One of them, tall and with a smug smile, and a varsity jacket slung over one shoulder, met her gaze. He didn't smile, only smirked, as if he was privy to some information she wasn't. Then as she walked by, he rolled his shoulder against hers, bumping her out of balance. Her books fell and went flying across the... Still, she didn't utter a word. Maya crouched down silently, picking up her notes and folders. Her heart didn't skip a beat. Her back remained straight. She'd learned how to respond to disrespect with dignity. But then as she stood up, a swift sting came to her cheek. Sharp, quick, unexpected. One of the boys had slapped her. Not all his might, but enough to shame. The sound carried just loud enough to turn a few heads. For a moment time froze. Her gaze met his, and something moved inside of her. Not anger, not fear, but a clear, deep knowing that this was the line no one had the right to cross. What that boy and his laughing companions did not know was that Maya was not as breakable as she appeared. For years, she had been taught self-defense by her father, not in sport, but in protection. Not to be a fighter, but never be a victim. And there, in the midst of the din of a world that too often ignored girls like her, Maya realized in an instant that this was about more than just her. It was about every quiet child who'd ever been pushed, ridiculed, or disrespected for merely existing with their head up. And in the next beat, the corridor still vibrating on either side of her. Maya breathed in and made a choice that would not only save herself, but wake the entire school up to a reality it had been ignoring for far too long. The bell clanged clean and clear for third period, ringing out through the halls of Jefferson High like a call of habit. Students flowed out of classrooms, the beat of an ordinary school day ticking along. Maya Thompson, perpetually punctual and perpetually alone, gripped her notebook and chemistry text against her chest, as always, like armor to protect her from a world that sometimes was a bit too rough around the edges. Her gaze remained forward, not out of fear, but concentration. That was Maya, controlled, serene, with a quiet internal life that she didn't let just anyone enter. The corridor was long before her, but she knew the route. Take a turn to the right by the trophy display, pass by the water fountain, steer clear of the rowdy horde beside the gym doors. It was the same route she walked every Tuesday, but occasionally, even the familiar road can get hazardous. She had seen them before they had seen her. 3 boys, all in varsity jackets, laughing too loudly and talking too loudly for a school corridor. They were members of the football team, the type of boys who plowed through school on charm and brawn. One of them, Jason, had grinned at her 2 days earlier as she passed by the cafeteria. "You always so serious," he'd snapped, flinging the words out as if they were intended to weigh her down. She hadn't replied. Maya didn't play those kinds of games, but today it wasn't about words. As she walked toward the area closer to the lockers where they habitually leaned, standing in part of the walkway, she didn't let up. She didn't need to. Students were supposed to give each other space, but not all of them learned respect at home. She was passing, and Jason moved into her path and elbowed her shoulder firmly, firm enough to send her stumbling backward. She recovered fast, attempted to adjust without an outburst, but another boy, Chris, smaller but nastier, snapped her books from her grasp. They landed on the floor with a resounding thwop, papers fluttering out across the tile like autumn leaves. The laughter that ensued wasn't pleasant. It was mocking, biting, and intended to shame. Maya crouched down deliberately, her face serene, her hands unmoving. She didn't utter a word. She didn't look at them. She simply collected her papers, one at a time, as the hallway behind them went on, some glancing, others feigning ignorance. The boys did not turn away. They loomed over her, waiting, half hoping she would do something. She didn't, not yet. When she grabbed the final paper, the one that had slipped close to Jason's foot, he glanced around, his friends encouraging him with smirks and jostles, and then with a look of smug bravado, he stretched out and slapped her, not bruisingly hard, but hard enough to make a noise. It wasn't a punch, it wasn't even hard, but it was a line drawn, a line so fine and cutting it might slice through steel. That noise, flesh colliding with flesh, seemed like time stood still for half a beat. Maya blinked once, that was all. Her eyes increasingly looked up to his, and something shifted, not out there but deep inside. In that single little second, the soft, reserved girl who had traversed those corridors for almost 3 years,
The one who kept her nose out of everyone else's business, kept her head down, and turned the other cheek, faced off with something raw and ugly. And in that instant, she knew she wasn't scared. Not of them, not of being noticed, not of what happened next. Because what those boys did not know, what nobody really knew, was that Maya had been training for this moment her entire life. Her father, who was a retired army drill instructor, had taught her how to stand her ground from the time she was 10. Not so you can fight, he would say, but so you know you don't have to run. Every weekend she trained, not in kicks or punches, but balance, leverage, breath, control. She knew how to calm down, and better yet, she knew how to react when calming down could no longer be done. As Maya rose slowly, her expression inscrutable, the tension of the hallway gathered around her changed. Other kids felt something was building. Some stopped walking in their tracks. Some whispered, but Maya didn't blink. Her body remained frozen, but her mind flowed like water, clean, intent, and forceful.
She said nothing, raised no hands. She just stood there. And although nobody heard it, something within her whispered softly, "No more." The boy who had hit her burst out laughing, an uncertain, stammering laugh this time, like he was attempting to push away what he'd just done. His friends were uncertain now, watching her closely, but Maya's face had not altered. She was not angry. She was not afraid. She was sure. And in the quiet, there in the midst of a high school corridor, filled with the din of ordinary life, a line that had been crossed was soon to be reordered. What those boys did not know, what no one ever noticed when they looked at Maya Thompson, was the inner pool of strength she possessed. It wasn't loud or showy, and it wasn't the kind of strength that needed attention. It was the sort that was constructed painstakingly over years, piece by piece, moment by moment, lesson by lesson, not in boisterous gyms or under harsh lights, but in hushed corners of her dad's humble living room, where Saturday morning routines tended to start with deep breaths and the reassuring voice of a man who'd seen the world at its worst and wanted his daughter to be ready for the best and the worst of it. Maya's father, Sergeant Marcus Thompson, had spent 20 years in the Army. He was not an hard man, but he was a believer in being ready, not only physical readiness, but mental quiet, the kind that comes from understanding your limits and your value. As soon as Maya was 10 years old, he started to teach her basic movement, how to plant her feet, how to manage her breathing when it really mattered, how to sense the weight and momentum of another body, not to overpower them, but to defend herself when nobody else would. He explained to her, "You never initiate the fight, baby girl, but you finish it if you must." And so for years they trained, slow to begin with, then smoother. She practiced moving quietly, but with intent. Her classmates assumed she was merely limber from yoga. Her instructors merely noticed a focused student, but beneath Maya lay a quiet preparedness, like water that was still before the storm. So when that slap came in the hallway, ringing so hard it could have cracked the air but not quite hard enough to leave a mark, it wasn't anger that welled up in, it was determination. She didn't weep, she didn't seek assistance, and she didn't utter a word. She just stared up at the boy before her, and in the gap between that slap and the next gasp, she recalled all that her father had instructed. The hallway seemed to reach miles in that one moment, time slowing sufficiently to allow her a glimpse of the shock on his face. He didn't anticipate her to do anything. He believed she'd just let it happen, but Maya was not there to be anyone's target. And what came next would remind everyone at that school that quiet doesn't weak. She stepped forward once, slow, deliberate, and in one seamless motion, she turned her body using a practiced pivot. Laurie out for the boy's outstretched arm and used the very strength of his own positioning against him. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't brutal. It was effective. Her hip dropped under his center of gravity. Her back arched with precision, and within less than a second, his feet had left the floor. Gasps hung in the air. Even several papers fluttered to the floor out of neighboring hands. The boy who was laughing just seconds before was now soaring, his body contorting in the air before thudding heavily against the floor. The noise reverberated like a drum down the corridor, muffling all conversation at once. He curled up on the floor, howling in agony, his shoulder twisted at an unnatural angle. Afterwards in the emergency, the physician would verify what Maya already suspected, that shoulder dislocated from the force of the fall, and perhaps requiring weeks to mend. But at that instant, in that second, no one among the students or passers-by was concerned with the medical prognosis. They gazed immobile, in mute shock. His two friends didn't budge, pale faces, open mouths, wondering whether to flee or assist, but did nothing. Because Maya didn't move at all. She just stood there, breathing gently, hands at her sides, not gripped, not raised, just motion. There was no pride written on her face, no smile, no revenge, just clarity. She was not trembling. She was not gloating. She was just there, like a stone in the middle of a river, unbroken by the current. And then not quite 10 seconds later, the quiet was interrupted by the rushed footsteps of a teacher running down the hallway. Mrs. Daniels, the 10th grade English teacher, came around the corner and surveyed the scene. One boy lying on the floor, two others frozen in shock, and Maya, tall, serene, and unblinking, the middle. The teacher's voice rang out, firm and alarmed, demanding to know what was going on. But nobody responded immediately. Not because they didn't know, but because what they'd just witnessed wasn't fully in their heads yet. It wasn't that Maya had stood up for herself. It was that she did, without screaming, without panicking, without making a scene. She had done it on purpose, calmly, and with a deep strength that could result from intense confident training. For years, those boys probably thought that power was derived from size, from loudness, from quantity. But Maya taught them something else, that true strength, the sort that endures, originates in discipline, training, and self-respect. And in doing so, she didn't save herself. She rewrote the rules of that corridor. She rewrote the rules of that corridor. The instant Mrs. Daniels got between them, urgency filled the silence. With steady, trained firmness, she knelt beside the hurt boy to look at him, her voice a blend of surprise and concern. Other staff and teachers joined them instantly. The hallway that had been full of noise and adolescent motion a moment before now was like a movie pause. Each frame weighed heavily with tension. Maya didn't panic or struggle. She answered Mrs. Daniels' questions calmly, in simple, truthful language, as the hurt boy flinched and grasped his shoulder, his friends glancing around as if wondering whether to stand up for him or vanish. In a matter of minutes, the boy was being escorted to the nurse's office, and Maya was being led, without handcuffs, without embarrassment, into the office. But the reverberations of what had occurred did not remain in the confines of that corridor. As Maya passed down to the office, footsteps light, whispers were already alive. Throughout the cafeteria and over into the math room, students were speaking softly about what they'd witnessed. There were some who told it as it was, others embellished. She flipped him like a movie, one declared. No, she punched him, another repeated. No, she just stood there, a girl breathed in wonder. The tales started spreading their way through the entire school like a breeze with sparks, small flames that have the power to set something much larger ablaze. Rumors spread like wildfire in high school, but the truth, that always catches up. In the principal's office, Maya took the same seat that students had avoided for years, the same seat that was typically reserved for troublemakers or rule breakers. But Maya did not appear to be either. She sat upright, with her hands folded together, and replied to each question with quiet fortitude. She did not yell. She did not accuse. She simply spoke the truth. He hit me, she stated. I defended myself. The principal, Mr. Reynolds, a graying man, who was known to be fair but firm, heard attentively, stopping more than once to look over at Maya, as if seeing her with new eyes. Calls were placed. The assistant principal reviewed security footage of the hallway. Some of the students who had seen what happened provided statements, their voices trembling initially, but increasing in strength as they described what they witnessed. The truth, unadorned and straightforward, spoke for itself. By mid-afternoon, it was established that Maya hadn't started anything. The boys had surrounded her, bullied her, and one of them had touched her. What ensued was an attack. It was defense. A reaction, not an assault. And in a moment of almost complete accountability, the school moved quickly. The boy who slapped her, Jason, was suspended for 2 weeks, as were the 2 other boys who had assisted in blocking path and harassing her. Maya was not disciplined, though. No detention, no write-up on her record, no angry phone call home. Really, when her dad was called, he came not with a lawyer or an argument, but with the same composure Maya had possessed. He shook the principal's hand and uttered only this: "She did what I taught her to do, nothing more, nothing less." But whereas the school played it by the book, something much greater started unfolding beyond the confines of that office. The news spread, first among students, then parents, then out into the community. It began as hallway rumor, but soon became a dinner table discussion. staff lounge chatter, even Sunday morning sermon. Parents called the school, not in outrage, but to express gratitude for addressing it with equity, for standing up for their children's right to defend themselves when no one else would. Teachers started seeing their students in a different light, understanding how many quiet ones such as Maya filled their hallways each day, strong in ways not always apparent, and the students, particularly those who tended to keep their heads down, stay out of sight, or be afraid of being seen, they started walking a little more proudly, shoulders back, eyes up, not because they wanted to fight, but because they'd witnessed what it looked like when somebody stood up without rage, without violence, only clarity and self-worth. Maya had become something nobody could have predicted, a quiet symbol of strength and quiet dignity, not a troublemaker, not a vigilante, but a young woman who knew her worth and wouldn't let anyone steal it away from her. Some of her peers referred to her as a hero, others called her courageous, but to Maya, it didn't matter what anyone called her. She hadn't set out to prove anything or make a spectacle of herself. She'd done what she did because it was right, because it was about her body, her peace, her dignity, and those were not negotiable. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that standing up doesn't always include yelling. At times, it is quiet. At times, it is consistent. At times, it is a girl who keeps her books near and her head held high, and who understands that she never must settle for being treated poorly in order to maintain peace. That altered the school, not the fall, not the slap, but the strength of one quiet voice, one courageous decision, and one indelible moment of honesty. Maya never bragged about what she did. In the weeks and days that went by after, when classmates passed by her with wide eyes, or spoke her name in awe, she never said more than a soft smile or a quiet nod. She didn't enjoy attention. Indeed, the limelight made her uneasy. Maya had always liked silence over chaos, quiet spots over crowds. She didn't want kudos, and she wasn't seeking reputation, but something had shifted, and not solely with her. There was something different in the atmosphere. At Jefferson High now, quiet but palpable, the hall that had once been a gauntlet to navigate, particularly for students like Maya, quiet, unassuming, respectful, now contained this other thing. People moved just as deliberately. Eyes that once looked past her now met hers with recognition, not awe, not fear, but a sort of quiet respect. Even the boys who once roughhoused too loudly or pushed through the halls seemed to hold themselves with a little more restraint. Teachers saw it too, how some kids straightened up a little in class, how others spoke a little louder during group projects. It was as if Maya's quiet defiance had pulled something back in the school's psyche, revealing the potential for dignity to hold its ground, even against cruelty. And the ripple effect didn't end there. The principal addressed morning announcements regarding respect and responsibility, not merely as school policies, but as human virtues. A guidance counselor started a fresh lunchtime group for students interested in discussing self-esteem, setting boundaries, and emotional safety. Kids attended, kids who otherwise remained silent or didn't come to lunch at all. One girl even handed Maya a note between classes that said, "Because of you, I told my mom what happened at my old school. Thank you." Maya never mentioned the note, but folded it up and had it tucked in the back of her binder next to her chemistry worksheets. Life went on. Midterms arrived and departed. Spring blooms graced the courtyard. Maya maintained her routine, still sitting in her same seat near the window, still taking the same hallways, still working at the animal shelter on Saturday. But deep inside of her, something had come to rest. She didn't need to shrink anymore. She didn't feel invisible. No, but she didn't feel exposed either. She felt grounded, strong. Bravery wasn't in the flash of brimstone, movie trailer sort of way, but it was in the everyday kind of way that meant she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, she could trust herself, that she could keep herself safe, that her quiet wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. And as the year drew to a close, and kids started discussing summer vacation, college aspiration, and senior year objectives, Maya stayed constant, steadfast, poised, generous. But those who paid attention saw that her gait had altered, merely slightly. Her shoulders rode higher. Her eyes no longer dropped when someone walked by. She smiled more frequently, not wide, flashy grin, but subtle ones indicating calm. She had worked hard for that calm, And even though the encounter in the hallway had taken only seconds, its significance reached far into the future. It became an unspoken legacy, something unvoiced but profoundly felt. Because the truth is, Maya didn't merely stand up for herself that day, she stood up for everyone else as well. She reminded an entire building full of adolescents that silence isn't necessarily surrender, and that stillness doesn't equal submission. She showed them that power isn't about force, it's about knowing your worth and not allowing anyone to take it from you. Maya never tried to be anyone's hero. She didn't want a title. She didn't want to be known for one day, one action, or one hallway showdown. But in the quiet spaces between then and now, she became a symbol, not of defiance, but of quiet courage. And in a world that so frequently honors the loudest voice, Maya's power whispered something much more powerful. You don't need to raise your voice to rise. She ended the school year strong, grades remaining intact, reputation intact. She still walked around with books in hand, still wore the lavender sweater on Tuesdays, still uttered the word thank you when someone opened the door. But behind each thank you, each step, each steady stare, was a girl who understood that one moment doesn't make you who you are, but it can reveal to you exactly who you've always been. Maya Thompson didn't become someone different that day in the hallway. She showed herself, and in showing herself, she changed everything around her. Sometimes the strongest moments of life don't receive applause or headline. They show up quietly, in the midst of a routine day, when no eyes are on us but everything's at stake. We all experience time, either in our younger years or later on, where we're asked to stand up, not with aggression or violence, but with the quiet strength that resides in our soul. Maya's tale reminds us that dignity does not have to be loud to be heard. It is how we hold ourselves when no one is watching, how we defend our peace without the need for revenge, and how we teach others by example, not words, what respect is. In a world that sometimes equates silence with weakness and kindness with softness, it takes true strength to embrace both, and to have faith that they will suffice. And perhaps that's what we can learn today, to keep with us, that our value isn't determined by how loudly we react to the world, but by how deeply we believe in ourselves. At 16 or 60, there is always worth in holding on to your truth, being kind to others, and never letting the din around you disturb the peace within. Life might not always give us simple decisions, but even in our most minute moments we are capable of deciding grace over fear, and courage over silence. So wherever you are today, which hallway you are walking down, just recall quiet strength leaves the deepest imprint, and sometimes, the softest presence can have the loudest message.